All right. My name is Jaron Matheson, and I am the host of the Upstream podcast. Today's guest is a very good friend. And if I need something done or figured out that's technical, this is the guy that I go to. I will either call him, text him, or the next time I see him, ask him the question. He is probably in the top 5 people of intelligence that I know,
Dang.
which says a lot because he's still very, very young, and which is great because he has so many more years to um, elaborate and gain knowledge on everything that he knows. He's also a musician, and me and him and our mutual friend Liz Conway are writing some music right now. Very excited. And I also work with Jake. He is going to be coming with me to Vegas
Yeah.
tomorrow and a whole bunch of other stuff. But this is Jake Hatch, everybody.
Hello. That's me. I very much appreciate what you said about the intelligence because, I mean, I think I'm smart, but not that smart. So,
Yeah, no, you're very smart, man. I would say, like I said, top 5.
dang,
Um,
that's pretty up there.
it
Who's the
is.
other top five?
My father-in-law is
Okay.
definitely got to be in the top 2. Um, and there's just some other people you don't know, but yeah, definitely top 5 of people I've ever met on
Dang.
that.
I'll
You know,
take
the,
it.
the thing that I like about too is there's a lot of difference between knowledge and wisdom, and I feel like you have a lot of knowledge like that, but you also have wisdom even at your young age um, to go along with the knowledge that you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, all right. So, what do you think when you hear the word upstream? What comes to your mind?
Upstream. Um, I always think of a river, of course, upstream. Like rejuvenation going to the source. You go upstream, just like kind of like fish returning to their spawning place. They're going up, going back to their roots. You go up to get back to the top to the fresh waters. The more downstream you go, the more it gets dirty. You know how the Mississippi gets at the end. So yeah, that's what I think of upstream.
Go back to the source. So, that's the Mississippi. I grew up in Minnesota, and that's where the source of the Mississippi comes from in the Boundary Waters. And I believe it's in Walker, Minnesota, around that area at least, is where the Mississippi starts.
Yeah.
So interesting. We had another guest on here say pretty close to the same thing.
Oh
Leah, my
yeah.
wife,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
Brianna mentioned she just mentioned salmon.
Oh, salmon,
Yeah, fish.
fish. I mean, I was gonna say salmon, but then I was like, do I want to say that?
Yeah, no, that's great. So today's topic, everybody, is one that we actually got to listen to yesterday, Jake,
Right. Yeah.
at church.
Hmm.
Our pastor Tracy was talking about Genesis 6 and the unseen realm and all the crazy stuff that a lot of Christians and believers I feel kind of get sometimes about. And we
Hmm.
planned on talking about this before we heard
Right. Yeah.
the her speak, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is just like confirmation that this is very interesting topic." And I feel like
Seems very prevalent, like, in culture, Christian culture, like, seems, like, popping up more and more. I think it's, like, good that people are kinda taking interest because it's one of those things, like you said, people get irked, they're like, "Oh, is this scary?" And, like, "Is this gonna shake my faith or whatever?" It's like, "No. It should reinforce your faith, if anything."
I know, right? Like if all this crazy stuff is really real, it also or it
Yeah.
it really makes this whole reality that we live in almost shattered of it's really supernatural and not just this physical. And so I think you got it up, but would you read Genesis 6 because that's where we're going to
Yes.
start with this conversation.
I have the Psalms 82.
We're going to get to that one, but we're going to start. Yeah.
Alright, this is the wickedness in the world. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose. And the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years." The Nephilim were on earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart were only evil of all time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings in the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. The Lord said, "I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, the creatures that move along the ground. For I regret what I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. But right away,
Yeah, I'm gonna
I
keep
want
this
to hear your
open.
thoughts on it. Starts out with the sons of God looked down on the women like that. How did it say? What does it say again? Read that one part.
The sons of God saw the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose.
Okay, so when it says that,
Hmm.
break me down. When it says sons of God looked at the female humans, is he talking about male humans there, or what is he talking about?
I don't think so. I think he's talking about the actual spiritual beings. So I wanted to cross. I came into this thing. I want to cross reference Enoch a little bit. I know not everyone subscribes to thinking that's canon, and it is a little bit,
Yeah.
but it talks about, especially this Genesis 6 part. It does recap that part right there, and it talks about how these beings they're essentially kind of everyone thinks, "Oh, these are just fallen angels," but they are in a sense, but they're the beings that God created, like the angels and all of them were made in the heavens before, the earth and everything. Um, how am I gonna word this? They're not they are physical, but not spiritual. I think a lot of times people get them mixed up with demons.
Hmm.
And these fallen angels, they're part of the heavenly host that Satan was a part of. They're in the ranks of angels, and they're the ones that fell with Satan. And then when they saw the humans, the women, they took for them the wives, and then off from them the offspring came, which were the Nephilim.
So the Nephilim are basically what demigods is what you would kind of
Yeah,
call it in like a non-Christian realm basis. So this is interesting. So everyone grew up with like Hercules and like Thor, and
right,
Thor's pretty relevant now because of Marvel, but you have all these like demigods per se and all these like superhero movies that have all these powers. And we all act like they're these, magical fairy tale, story things, and then they're just movies. And I've been just watching all these things lately, and it's really hitting me the more that I unpack the Bible and the more that I like dive into like this unseen realm stuff of like, man, these guys were probably real. And these probably were like the Nephilim. And these probably were actual
right,
like they were like worship. And so as I was reading the Old Testament this year, um, it's so different when you have a different eye when you're reading it. There's so many little G God references in the
hmm
Old Testament that I never saw, or I just thought of physical statues. And I'm like,
or
this
like,
thing
yeah,
is
idol or something.
they're everywhere, these little G gods all over the Bible. And so I'd love for you to when you get into that part, break that down for me a little bit when you talked about Enoch and how it kind of did that with the Nephilim. But this kind of solves my issue I had with the Noah story with the flood. Like, how would God just wipe out all of humans because they were bad? Like, I just
Right, you look at even today and you're like, it can't be worse than it is now." Like there's got to be something like that. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of go back to the Nephilim and the starting there. You actually look at the etymology of the word Nephilim. A lot of people would take it as it actually translates to the fallen ones. So a lot of people be like, "Oh, that's the fallen angels, obviously." You read into Enoch a little more, and you're like, "Okay, no, these spirits and Nephilim are actually the offspring of the Watchers, which is mentioned in Enoch,
Mhm.
which are the sons of God." And if you actually look into that word a little bit more in the actual Hebrew, what it actually means is more or less the fallen ones and more like the fallen heroes. So, like you said, with like these like demigod guys and all the Greek mythology and all these other mythologies, people, the tradition would do make idols of these creatures or these people, these giants. We're gonna get to giants,
Yeah, we're gonna get there.
the giants, and they would worship them. And so they actually look at some of the older texts. They'd actually condemn the priests and everything. Would condemn the people. Like, you can't worship these demigods and stuff. It's idol worship. And what was the other one? And then when going into Noah, these beings would rule over the people, almost kind of like kingships, and they would rule and just be like worship, and they would command these people to do like heinous things. Um, if you look in Enoch, it breaks down what each of these like groups and the Watchers taught humans. They taught them how to create war, create iron, makeup is one of them, strategy and as well as fire and things like that. And if you look at it that way, you're like, it's interesting. Maybe we wouldn't have had any of these things without them teaching this. So it's like most, and it talks about in Enoch how God ascribes sin to these beings and not to humans. So when you
Interesting.
look at it through that whole lens, going to Noah, and you're like, why is God just wiping this out? It can't be that bad. Well, it's really because everybody was worshiping these beings and these gods, and the whole earth was just corrupted. All flesh was corrupted. Even the animals were corrupted with
Like the bloodline,
the
right?
bloodlines. I mean, it doesn't specifically say that these fallen angels were procreating with animals, but it does reference that might happen a couple
You know,
times.
I think the mosquitoes and the wood ticks and the spiders, they seem like they're from the Nephilim.
Yeah,
They're just crazy, man, some of these
wasps too.
bugs. Wasps?
Bees are all right, but wasps, man, they're evil. They got some leftover Nephilim in them.
Yeah. No, you know, I I've been wondering that most of my life of like, man, God just wiped out the whole earth. Like, what the heck were we doing? Because like I look, like you said, I look now and I'm like, it's so crazy what people are doing now, what they're worshiping and what they're doing to their bodies with the kids and the whole like
Mhm.
transhuman thing. And then we're gonna put microchips in our brain, and then we're, the whole like trans like of they're trying to transition little kids now, and, like, it's just so crazy, right? And so I'm like, "How bad could it have been?" And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, there's more going on."
Well, and then everything that's ever happened in their sun has happened. So you know that these beings, like they taught them war and everything. This knowledge that these beings had, they're teaching them. It's probably the very same to what we're having today with the gender stuff too,
Yeah.
and just the mutilation of what humans are, the image of God and what they're supposed to represent. And I mean, God says He's like He regrets making humans in the Genesis 6.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't it? Yeah, he regretted it.
But he still came down and sent his son, Jesus, to save us.
Yeah,
I mean, he regrets it, but he still saves us. Yeah, that's a that puts things in some perspective there.
right.
And, man, I will tell you, I've been reading this book. It's by Wendy Alec, and there's 5 of them, and I'm at this spot right now where you're following around Lucifer, Gabriel, and Michael, and then there's 24 elders, and one of the elders fall. The elders are the council with God. They help decide things, do things, and there's all these different levels of knowledge, of stuff, and one of the elders falls with Lucifer, and one of these things I'm reading this, and it talks about the Watchers, okay?
Hmm.
And Lucifer and this high up, council person in this book, they know that if they go have sexual relations with the humans, they will get sent to the abyss early because it breaks eternal law.
Right.
And so Lucifer and this high up, his name in the book is, I think it's like Karsak or something like that. They trick the generals to go and, have fun and pleasure themselves all they want. Well, after, a while, Michael and Gabriel come down, and they come down with, the sword and fire, and like, you're getting thrown away right now. Like, you
Bye bye.
broke a law. And it's interesting because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because the generals, they felt so betrayed by Lucifer, and they couldn't believe that he let them out to dry. And so you have all these beings. Where I'm going with this is Lucifer all just out for him? Because there's got to be some kind of order. And is he that manipulative and that, deceptive, even with his own people? Probably because, right, that's like the nature of sin, right? Like, how can you even trust those your ranks in the demonic realm? Because it's got to be led by all fear and all these things. So I'm reading this
Yeah.
thing and I'm like, why do these angels all fall? And I have something on it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. I think they definitely, I mean, Satan's other name is the deceiver. I think he definitely is, and for the most part, out in for himself. I've heard one kind of theory that was really interesting about how with the archangels that each one of them has like they're under one of part of the Trinity. So God, like the Father, his was Lucifer. His was
Mhm.
his direct archangel underneath him, the one who was supposed to bring light and be the worshiper and display God's glory to all creation and everything. And then you have like Gabriel, which would be the Holy Spirit's, one. This is, and I don't know if
Yep.
it's true, but then Michael with Jesus, and how when Satan fell, he took the one third of the Father's angels with him, and that was his one third. And
Interesting.
so, because of the ranking, like they were in charge, they followed him because it goes, the Father, it was Lucifer, then the rest of them, and then each of them. And because just like the reference when Jesus with the soldier, he's like faith and he knows authority,
Mm.
and he heals his a servant because he had faith. Even he's like, you don't have to show up, just say it and he'll be done. And that's the same thing I imagine when you have these angels. They're even though they are looking, they know who is the ultimate authority. They still follow the authority of whoever's above them.
So there's just lots of structure and there's lots of order
Right.
and which is interesting because man, this book I'm reading just makes me think a lot. Is so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And
Hmm.
obviously, this book is just her idea of what could happen. She's not saying this is how it happened, but man, does it get you thinking? So what you said is Lucifer was right under God,
Hmm.
and Gabriel, Michael, and the Holy Spirit and Jesus. And so in this book, there's this part where Lucifer is falling, and his general doesn't want to go though,
Mm.
but his second general in command doesn't want to go either. But he says, "I'm bound to Lucifer.
Mm.
He's who I report to." Even though he worships God, he goes, "I gotta go." And so Lucifer, before he falls, he like gets him to swear fealty to him for eternity, and he
Hmm.
does it. And then he feels like he's stuck, and so he's at this battle. But what's interesting is the top general, he makes a choice, and he leaves. But you know what's crazy? Michael's top general, he falls with Lucifer, and they
Mm.
flip-flop top
They flip
generals.
flop.
Yeah,
It's
and
an
I was
interesting
like,
thought.
"That's an interesting thought," because when you said it, is it just the 3rd that had no
Right.
choice? Or is it some of them still did have a choice and they had to break the order, the rank order, and it was really tough, but did some do that? What do you think of that?
It's really interesting. I don't necessarily know if I believe the theory I mentioned because I think it's very interesting that there's a flip flop when that one story. Because
Yeah, it
I mean,
really makes you think.
in the Bible, it basically just kind of talks about how one third fell and that they were deceived. So I can imagine that these generals and say that they knew that they would get punished, that Lucifer probably was able to deceive them so well that they said, "Oh," he'd be like, "Oh, it's fine. Go down, take your wife." Like God didn't really say that.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that's just a warning because He doesn't want you to be happy and have kids and blah blah. Blah. And so He could have tricked them, got them to that place, and at that point, they're stuck. They're fallen.
Mhm.
They're irredeemable. They don't have the same redemption that we do in Jesus. And so at that point, they're kinda stuck with Satan. That's at least what I kind of thought with at least some of them. Now, some of them probably went more willingly, especially the higher up ones, the ones that there's like 7 in the book of Enoch. Like Satan's never mentioned, but assuming I think the main one in the book of Enoch, there's uh, I think Azazel is the one. So that would probably be who Satan was in that in when they were named. Um, and each one of them taught something different. Um, but I can imagine that the most of them either might have been tricked even into, like, falling for these women and, just kinda been stuck with Satan, and then afterwards, with God, the structure of the hierarchy of the angels and everything is built on trust and honor and leadership, and whoever you follow, you follow. Because why would you not like, if you can fully trust God, why would you not trust all of your subordinates? But with Satan, once you're there fallen, it's all ruled by fear. Like, I can imagine there are probably some fallen angels and demons who they're evil to their core, but they also don't do things out of wanting to do it, but actually just because Satan they have such a fear of Satan or even God punishing them that they
Yeah.
do it out of spite.
What do you think of this? So, like, that just brings a lot back to the garden. And so, say you have the garden, and Eve is, and Adam, they're, having conversations with God. They're walking
Mhm.
with God. They're walking with other angels, probably. And so you have Lucifer shows up. If he's in his light state, why would Eve? This is if he could show himself, if we don't know when he fell, but like think just go with me here for a second is imagine Lucifer's in the garden, presents himself as his light bearing image to Eve. Eve is probably going to recognize that they're like, "Oh, you're a son of God."
Right.
And he goes, "You should eat of this tree." Right? And she's like, "Well, no, we've been told not to." And then that's where the ultimate deception comes in of the trickery. And you're like, "Wow, that must have been that could have been a very interesting way if that's how that happened, of him presenting himself as somebody that Eve and Adam would recognize as someone walking in, and maybe they've never met him before, but they would have recognized the presence of what he
Right.
was."
I think even after he fell, he still it still talks about in the scriptures how that he presents himself as a being of light,
Yeah.
even now, to people, and whether that's a physical manifestation or a metaphorical one, that's the ultimate deception. I think that his strategy is always to bring enough truth to make you believe it, but then just give a slight twist where you make you question, like, well, is that the full truth, or am I missing something? And then in that slight deception, you decide to choose the wrong thing. Like with Eve, it's like she knew that, or actually, I don't know if she actually knew, because it was God who told Adam not to eat of the tree, but it never says that she was created after that though.
Mm.
So we don't really know whether he told her or not. Um, and I think that's partly why God did blame Adam too. Is like, hey, you should have said something. And then, especially when she came to him, he could have been like, "Oh, we're not supposed to do this because God told me not to," but then he still took part of it anyway because she was deceived, and that's why Satan went to her first because she didn't know. And so for her, it
Mm.
was like a lot of people give Eve, a lot of hard time for doing that, but I think also she just didn't know as much, and so when she was deceived, she knew of God, she knew of the relationship, she knew of all these things, and Satan basically said, like, "Oh, no, God didn't say that, like, it's fine, just take this, why would God tell you why he's trying to keep this from you?" And when you're a being who doesn't really know of why, and God doesn't tell you why not to eat of it, and you're a human, it's so easy to fall into that thinking a pattern of, "Oh, maybe it is that," because you just don't know.
That also goes back to what you were saying from a s hierarchical structure standpoint of if she recognized that, "Oh, this is one of those sons of gods," whether
Mhm.
she met him before or not, of like, "Yeah, I probably trust you, like, if you tell me something." So
Right,
there's almost like I can see now why maybe some of these angels that they fell, they might have not even known. S Maybe. I mean, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but, like, of what was really going on at some point, at some level.
right.
I don't know.
And I think a lot of the ones who fell, I mean, it literally says, they saw the women that they were beautiful, and it's like makes you remember, like, wait, if they had children and these are physical beings, and it's like they actually interact with the humans on a certain level where the humans actually recognize them as non-creation,
So, basically, this
or
is
at least
what
not like creation when that they're part of,
yeah. So, this is kinda like the whole alien thing, right?
right? I was trying to segue.
Segue into the alien, the giants, the whole yeah. So, real quick on the Watchers.
Mhm,
So, they come down, they have sexual relationship with the woman, they create the Nephilim,
mhm.
break down yet again the difference between a Nephilim, a principality, and a demon for everybody. What is your knowledge that you know and what you've read and how they differ?
Okay, so this one, I think there's a not a big misconception, but a lot of people just don't know. Like, oh, demons are just like the fallen angels. No, so fallen angels are the actual angels or being sons of God. There's a lot of names for them nowadays. We just call them angels. Um, but the demons are actually the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which are the children of the Watchers and the humans. And so those Nephilim are the giants, the demigods, all these mythical kind of deities, and when they were killed, either in the flood or by other humans or by God directly, their disembodied spirits have nowhere to go because they're not soul bearing like the way that we are, where we either go to hell or heaven. They're not necessarily even destined for hell because hell was created for the Watchers originally, and that it talks a little bit of that in Enoch, and so. even these demons, they're evil spirits, but they don't have anywhere to go, so God makes them remain. And he also sends them to hell, but he leaves them on the earth. And so the spirits that are remaining on the earth after the Nephilim were killed, those are the demons. Um,
So they are floating among us, you would say, or like they're still here interacting. They can get attached to you and do things. So when someone says, "Hey, let's cast out a demon," they're not
mhm,
referring, or you're saying that's completely different than an actual fallen angel.
yes. Like the fallen angels, those are more even more physical beings. So I believe that a lot of like it talks about some of them are chained up underneath the Euphrates, four of them, and that they'll be released during like the end times. But those are actual physical beings, and they're not necessarily only spiritual. Now, I think they have a spiritual component, and they can actually go to those spiritual dimensions. However, they also have a physical form. That's why they're able to interact. But demons, they're only spiritual. They used to be physical. They used to be only physical via Nephilim, and now they're only spiritual. Um, and I think there's, like, different degrees, like, some more conscious depending on what Nephilim they might have been. I mean, I can imagine this is just my theory, but they were like the Minotaur and everything, those probably Nephilim.
Yeah.
And so those are probably more just dumb spirits. They're probably just attached to you, create give feelings and do, all that stuff, and there's more, like, conscious ones who were more, human-like or had more of the human-esque in them, like the giants, and those ones are the kind of demons that you get that are more psychologically like Legion, the schizophrenia, those ones actually can mess with your thoughts. At least that's what I've kind of come to
So
perceive.
what do you think on these disembodied spirits and the demons running around? Do they have allegiance to Lucifer and his generals? Can they command them? Do they report to them? Or are they just kind of like free for all and they're not on anyone's team? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, my thought is that they're more like in their entirety, they're more like Legion, like altogether. So that there is Satan, there's the fallen angels, and I think they are more individuals. But I think pretty much all demons are kind of legion. They don't really have individual identity. Whatever kind of identity they do have is the kind of type of demon that they are, or at least what ways they attack humans, I think. So they don't really have any personality beyond that. Um, and they are probably really resentful of God for the way that their spirits are, because they're not beautiful spirits, like they're ugly. It talks about that they're kind of like ugly spirits and that they're, you know, bad.
So do you think they're on Lucifer's team then? Not necessarily free for all in it as much?
Yeah, I think that they are. I think they're if they might be freely I think they do follow because they're the sons of these beings. And
Yeah.
so like just like you would listen to your own father, they'd probably listen to them. And it might not be as like kind of intellectually advanced as we think. They might just be really kind of dumb in some cases, but they still will follow, I think, that kind of hierarchy of family and even rank of the army of Saiyan or whatever that is.
Yeah. So what do you think about like eternal law? So like I love the Chronicles of Narnia,
Hmm.
and there's a part in there where Aslan sacrifices himself, which is a representation of Jesus dying on the cross when he died on the rock and the rock split. And he made a comment of it, and he says it's never been tested, but he was there basically when the word was written, like when the
Hmm.
earth was created, that anyone,
When the deep magic
the
was
deep
written.
magic was written. There we go. We got a
Wow.
C.S. Lewis fan in the house, folks. When the deep magic was written and the witch just didn't know it. And so God has this like eternal law that he follows. And this is kind of when the Watchers, when I was talking about earlier, they broke it because when they went and had sexual relations with the female, they broke an eternal law. They were not supposed to do that. So something had to happen early because otherwise, I'm assuming they would all be running around here still doing things if they didn't break some kind of thing that they needed to be punished at some point that was earlier than the actual end for them. So when Aslan died on that and that as the representation of Jesus, I remember watching that movie and going, "Oh my gosh, this is Jesus dying." And I go, "There's this structure that's woven into our world and the spiritual world, and you got to follow it.
Yeah.
And the thing is and God follows it. Otherwise, he would not be a good God, right? Because he follows his order. And so it's interesting because Lucifer, the enemy, knows a lot of these rules, and
Yeah.
he knows what some of the moves God will do if certain things happen because he has to follow that. Now, he doesn't know everything, which
Yeah.
is obviously great, good for us.
Right.
And but he knows certain things have to be followed. And so, what do
And he'll
you,
try to take ground using those rules.
yeah,
Like take legalistic, like I have dominion here because so and so human is letting me have access.
this is exactly where I was going. So I was literally going into break me down the difference between dominion and authority from a human standpoint that we were given as the image bearer of God to come to the earth. And then as we give away dominion and authority, or can we keep one and not the other, or can we both give them away? Or what are your thoughts on all that stuff?
Um, Dominion and authority. I would okay. I want to reference like two different Bible stories. The first one would be Job. You look at Job at the end. Satan is the entire time talking to God, trying to get Job. He's like, "Can I kill Job? Can I kill?" And God's like, "No, you can't." And he's like, "Okay, well, then can I kill his kids?" Oh yeah. Why? Because Job has a fear of like losing all this stuff and fear of these things. So that's the open door that Satan has legalistic right. Because when Satan approaches God, God could say no, and it's not like he has to say yes necessarily, but God is almost testing Job in that moment, not testing him, but allowing him to be tested by the enemy. And at that moment, Job, he wants to kill Job, but he can't because Job still has a fear of God and he knows that he has not done anything wrong, that he is not sinned. The only thing that he has that's problem with him is his fear. So Satan's trying to get him to turn on God this entire time because he can't kill him. So he kills his kids, he takes his estate, he does all this stuff, and he still doesn't turn towards away from God, Job. And so I think that kind of gives a good glimpse of a little bit how the authority works. It's 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 like not the feelings necessarily that we have, but like when we engage in fear in these things and we don't take it to God and we kind of just let it go, Satan will always try to take hold of those loose areas in our life where we're not solidified with God. If Job had um, trusted God and trusted that everything like that, had no fear that he'd lose out on all of his earthly possessions, because that's what it was, is fear of losing his earthly possessions, then he wouldn't have had ground to lose them. So, and then the other one is the Jacob's ladder. Um, if you It talks about towards the end, there's the angel at the top that all the other reapers, which angels can also be called reapers, they harvest the souls of people. Um, there's the one who is Satan, one of these reapers, because he's still an angel, so he still has to report at the end of the age, and he wants to take all these souls with him, but he's asking to take certain souls, and he goes to the guy, goes to the top of Jacob's ladder, and this angel says, "No, you can't have them because of so and so reason." Um, but it just goes to show that even like that's where Satan tries to get his foothold. Is he even though he doesn't have the dominion to take these souls, he still will always go and has to report to, I think it's either Michael or Jesus at the top of Jacob's ladder. But he has to report to them and has to get legal right to take these souls. And so it is very legalistic um, in that regard. What was the other question you had?
I think it was that kind of answered them. It was more just I mean, you went way deep into that more than I thought you were, so that was really good. Is I don't even remember if I
That's
had
okay.
another
That's
one.
okay.
I think that was it on that part. I like I like the Job one because you said he has an open door, right?
Right.
And I think there's so many times we have open doors in our lives and we want to ignore it because it either gives us a good feeling, it gets us a high. We don't want to look at our inward self. And as we have these doors open, it's very hard for God to be like, "Yo, I got this big plan over here for you,
Yeah,
but I need you to close these doors first because, like,
he keeps attacking you.
he keeps attacking you, and if I give you this, he's just gonna take it."
Right, because you
Like,
have legal right through that door to
yeah,
take it.
and so sometimes it's like, man, the grass is really green on both sides here, it's that saying grace green, but it's like, I got this good thing, but like, hey, let's close these doors first.
Right.
And doors can be really little and they can let in a lot, right?
I mean, the one with Job was just fear. And you don't think that I when I first read it, I was like, "Really? That's why he lost everything? Was because he had a fear of losing it?" And that was why, like, I personally, like, I've had fears of losing just, worldly things or be like, "Man,
Yeah.
I really don't wanna lose that thing," but it's like that's what allows the enemy to take it. And, you really have to just focus on God and trust him, because otherwise, like, that's how you close those doors. It's kinda scary because it's like a very small thing, subtle thing. You just have to be always watchful, but
Yeah. No, that's good. All right, let's finish up with Psalm 82, I believe it is. And I think that's Michael Heiser's basic verse he uses from the Bible that he talks about in his unseen realm, and he goes from there a lot. And I just started reading that book. Man, it's a heavy book, and I started a while ago. I just haven't finished it yet.
yeah, I've started too.
It's taken me a minute, but yeah, go for it.
Alright, so a Psalm of Asaph. God presides in the great assembly, he renders judgment among the gods, and those are quotated too. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. The gods know nothing. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, "You are gods. You are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere mortals, and you will fall like every other ruler. Rise up, O God, judge of the earth, for all nations are your inheritance."
Okay, so the thing that sticks out to me on that one is that near the end he says, "You gods will die like mere mortals."
Right. Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming we're the mortals in that section,
Yeah.
so we can't be both, right?
It's not us. He's talking about the sons of God, which are those fallen angels, the watchers. Um, And it's interesting. I think we were gonna mention it with the principalities because there's a little bit different. Principalities, I don't really know, like, the technical definition of what they are, but the principality word is literally prince. It's a prince over a region
Mm,
or a prince over the air of that region. So, like, all the nations of the earth, different dominions and principalities reside physically of those locations. And so different spirits are literal princes of those areas. And so it talks about in right there in Psalm 82, um, God is talking, he's presiding in the great assembly and he's rendering judgment among the gods. So he's addressing these beings. And he says, "How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality toward the wicked?" And then he's paused and he's like, "Defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked." So that's he's addressing the gods right there, or the little gods of the spirit, like the angels, um, the fallen ones probably specifically. And he's talking about um, how they are showing partiality and showing like stuff towards the wicked. And so it makes me think that these are like the principalities that are over regions, and these are some of the fallen angels who didn't get locked away for procreating or something like that. Because it talks a little bit about Enoch that not all of these angels are necessarily locked away.
mm.
They were fallen to the earth and this realm, but they were not imprisoned like some of the watchers who created greater crimes, who were thrown to the abyss early or thrown a chain to the earth for reasons for the end times, like the ones in the Euphrates. So it makes me think that these are like these principalities and that they actually have power, and God still recognizes them as the powers over those areas. And he's addressing them as like, hey, you guys are not upholding my law, and you will die like mortals and then be cast to hell,
S
essentially.
Man, yeah. So why do you think that a big majority of the Christians stay away from this topic, or they get kinda like, "Ooh, weird," or if you talk about kind of and it's not everybody, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that you like bring this stuff up.
They're like,
They
"Oh."
kind of like go, whoa. And then there's people where like, you can't even get past like God doesn't even talk anymore. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, there's lots of people like that even out there
Yeah.
still. And you're just like, wait, wait, hold on. The guy who created everything doesn't speak anymore.
Even though he created the earth through
That doesn't
speaking.
make it. Yeah. But with all that, like, you just take a step back and you go, we really don't know a lot.
Yeah.
Like, and then the more you know, I feel like the more you don't know. And then you know that like there's so much going on and the fabric of the whole universe and everything created, it's just insane how crazy it
And
is.
in depth they can get too.
Yeah.
Technical. I think that's one of the main reasons why people are irked by it, because I think it's in some cases it's so complicated or so you can't get a full grasp on it that they're like so scared. They're like, I can't look into this because if I don't understand it, like I feel like I might, lose my foundation or I'll be following some weird kind of mystic kind of part of the religion. And then on the same side, I think people have also seen the people who get way into the details with it, like way too fanatical with like getting into the spiritual side. And there is a place for that, but it kind of scares people away because they're like, oh, these beings are this, and if you don't know this, you're not really a true Christian, blah blah. I think that's a little bit too far. But there's this really important middle ground where you need to recognize that this is where this realm is and that we live partially in a physical realm, partially in a spiritual realm,
Yeah.
and that these beings actually interact with us, doing things on a 24/7 basis. And that's partly what the preaching was on Sunday was about the angel side of that.
And I'm excited for the next 2 Sundays
Right.
because it's a 3-part, and I'm like, "Yes, this is gonna be great." So, I got one last thing for you to put in a nutshell is why is Genesis 6 so important for people to actually understand?
I think it's really important because it gives the basis for the spiritual side of the faith. Like at least or it puts it into perspective that it's not just a moral law because there are some Christians who are like it's just moral. There's no it's spiritual, but it's like that's for God to like worry about. It's not for us to worry about. And that's not necessarily true. Like God wouldn't he wouldn't mention this because it's kind of out of place in Genesis 6 when it talks about it. You're going from like creation story to kind of like the fall of Adam and Eve and all that. Then it's like, hi, Nephilim, fallen angels. All right, back to Noah. And then you're like, what is that? You're like, what? Doesn't make any sense. But I
It's
think
like a
it's
blip.
yeah, it's a
You're like,
blip.
"Wait, what?"
You're like, huh? What? Nephilim, huh? But I think it's really important because it expands on the history of that time because people would worship these beings, and two, it also like gives the basis of like, hey, these things actually interact with us. They literally physically came down and interacted with the women, had children, and it just gives it just solidifies that no, it's not only moral, this is spiritual too. So yeah,
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think this is our part 1 of part 3 that we
probably.
might, or part 7 or 8, because I think this one's gonna go we have many episodes on this one. This one was fun, and I'm
There's, like,
glad.
so much I'm like, I wanted to, like, circle back, but I'm like, "That's a little too deep for, like, right now."
Yeah, no, I know, I was the same thing. I was like, we coulda just stuck at the very beginning and not gone down all these other ones, but I just kinda wanted to cover a basis, but I think we should rewind and come back and dive more into this because, 1, like you said, what you just talked about, why it's important, but the other part is it's really interesting to talk about it because it really makes it for me, it makes my belief in God so much more deep and real and like, wow, like, this is just so cool. There's so much going on and, like, I just wanna, like, know more about it. I really do, and the best way is to go, read the Bible, obviously, find out what they're talking about with these little G's, Genesis 6, Psalm 80, 82, and then look at I like Michael Heiser, Unseen
Mhm,
Realm, and I like Blurry Creatures, shout out to them. It's the
mhm,
best podcast
and
to
they're
find.
Christians.
Yeah. They're biblically based, and they bring people on,
That's the
and
important part is biblically based.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, no, they're biblically based. They bring people on to share their experiences, and I love what they're doing. It's great, and Yeah, so we'll do a couple more of these definitely. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.